Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cinema Scoop podcast with Sam and Jordan. And today we will talk about the summer of 2011 when we both worked at a movie theater together as we were dating for the first 6 months or so. And just talk about, the funny stories we have from that experience, and then also the movies that came out that summer that we saw in the theater, and then a few that we saw outside of the theater we were working at.
Yeah, it's really funny to me. I almost forgot that this happened, that we worked at a movie theater together, just because it was so long ago. It was 13 years ago at this point, and I had just graduated high school and I needed a summer job, and so I got this as a summer job while I worked another job. And so, most of my summer was just me trying to make money. And so it was I was either working at my other job or this job.
So this was a theater that served food. So I was actually a food runner. I wasn't even a waiter. I was just, this order goes to this table, take it to that table. And then I kind of helped clean up a little bit after movies were ending.
I did the food running too at the start.
And then they put you in the box office,
which was great. I loved that.
But there were parts when the sun would set where the sun would be in your eyes for 2 hours at a certain part of the day. Remember that?
That would suck. But I think I just remember putting on sunglasses or whatever, or just kind of getting over it. But I remember it would get really hot in there. Maybe it was the summer in Texas. But if I was bored, I would just play video games on my phone or whatever, or play Sudoku, and nobody cared if I just sat around and didn't do anything. And we got a ton of free food and free drinks.
Yeah, it was 50% off food, and then free sodas, and then obviously free movies. But one of the interesting things is, being a food runner, you're having to go into the theater at any given moment within the movie time, because it's just whenever people order. And a lot of times, obviously, people order food before the movie starts or at the beginning of the movie. So a lot of these movies we're going to talk about, we saw the first 5 to 10 minutes within, momentary snippets of them, a lot. But it'd be there's some of these where we, actually on our day off would go and, just watch a movie for free.
Or after we got off.
If we, we had an earlier shift or whatever. Because there were definitely times where, we would get off at a certain time, and then we were okay, now we're going to see this movie at 8 o'clock or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There were other times where we were basically closing, and I was waiting for you to be done with the box office, and everyone had already ordered all their food. So I was kind of done for the night, and I had an extra 20 minutes, and I would just not sneak in because it was free, but I would just go into a movie whenever part they were in the movie I'd be watching at that time. So it would be interesting to kind of go into a movie when it's 30 minutes in and you don't know what's happening, but you're just doing it for free. So, but yeah, when you look back at this list of films we're going to talk about, it's an interesting time, 2011, because as far as being in a movie theater and box office type of stuff, this wasn't really a big box office summer, 2011. This was right when this was 3 years after they started the MCU. So we'll talk about Captain America in a minute. This was, I think the first Thor movie actually came out that May. And so it was when we first started, I think we had a few showings of Thor, but we never actually saw Thor in the theater. That was kind of one of the last movies before we really started working there for 3 months. I think one of the first movies I saw was Green Lantern.
Yeah.
And this was again before, this was the time where, The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises was coming out the year after. So DC was kind of on equal footing with the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
And, when I grew up, I watched a lot of the Justice League animated shows. So I actually knew what the Green Lantern was, and I liked that as a character, and I was more interested in that movie than the Captain America First Avenger movie, even though just from a film perspective, I would say Captain America is definitely better than Green Lantern. This is the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern where they animated his mask, and the CGI is pretty bad, but it's ultimately... I rewatched it maybe like a year or two ago, just on a whim, and it wasn't as bad as
Yeah.
people say, but it was an interesting superhero summer when we had Green Lantern competing against Captain America, and the film industry didn't know exactly
Yeah.
which one would do better.
The next one is the Jim Carrey movie, Mr. Popper's Penguins.
I loved this movie.
I haven't re-seen this in so long, and I rated it really low just because I don't remember it being like a good movie, but like I actually think I do like this movie because it's a book, and I remember like loving the book, and it's just like all about this guy who has penguins and he has to like store them in his freezer and stuff, and it's goofy.
I just specifically remember when we watched this, I ordered a pepperoni pizza and I had a pepperoni pizza for Mr. Popper's Penguins.
This is a quadruple alliteration.
And the place where we worked, their pizzas are really good.
Yeah.
And so it was like the first moment where I was enjoying 50% off pizza, a free movie, and we were like 5 months dating watching this Penguin movie. And it was actually a really great time.
Yeah. I remember, now that you're talking about the pizza, I'm like, I remember that like pretty well.
Okay, now what about Bad Teacher? What do you remember about the Cameron Diaz, Jason Segel? Then there was Justin Timberlake.
I don't know. I don't know if I remember much. I remember enjoying it enough, but this was kind of at the tail end of like the Cameron Diaz career.
Well, and a lot of comedies too. This was like,
Yeah.
we'll talk about some other comedies, but
The summer of like random comedy.
yeah, they don't really do this anymore. So like Bad Teacher, it's just Cameron Diaz has no money and wants a boob job. So she's like, I'll just be a substitute teacher, basically.
Yeah.
And she just doesn't care about it. And then Justin Timberlake plays like a dweeb who like is obsessed with Cameron Diaz. It's really not a good movie, but it's interesting that it was one of the first comedies we watched at this theater.
Oh, yeah. Then the next one's Transformers Dark of the Moon.
Yeah, this one I didn't really, it's like, I think it's the fourth Transformers. Maybe it's the third one. I don't even know. But like, yeah, the only thing I really remember about this one was
This is the one with Rosie Huntington Whiteley, who is the Victoria's Secret Angel. This is when they replaced, what's her name?
Megan Fox.
Yeah, this was the one without Megan Fox. I remember some of this.
Yes, I just remember the opening where like there's the moon and there's like the shadow and you get the dark side of the moon. But I don't remember anything else. Yeah, I think this is the last Shia LaBeouf one. But I remember I had to like deliver like these fried pickles to like start the movie, and I walked in the movie and there's just like the narration of Optimus Prime at the moon. He's like, dark side of the moon or whatever he says. But that's kind of like my only memory of that movie.
Oh my gosh.
I really liked Larry Crown. This random, and I didn't even know Tom Hanks directed this.
I didn't know that either.
It's Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts. Tom Hanks plays this guy called Larry Crown.
He's like a community college professor.
No, he enrolls at the community college.
Oh, yeah.
And his teacher is Julia Roberts.
So it's like he's a late bloomer going to like community college, and she's a young community college teacher. So it's like...
And he rides this terrible moped.
It was like supposed to be kind of like a cozy rom-com type of
Yeah, it was like, oh, Tom Hanks and Julia Roberts haven't done a rom-com yet. It's 2011. They should do a rom-com. But
Bryan Cranston, is it?
yeah, and Cedric the Entertainer, Pam Grier, Taraji P. Henson, George Takei. Like, it's a Rami Malek. Well, like...
I remember seeing this. I don't remember a lot about what happened.
Yeah, I know nothing about what. I just know they're on a moped.
I remember thinking it was a very odd pairing.
I think one of the things is like he has like multiple. He has just like constantly getting different jobs.
Oh yeah.
Like I remember he was like a Michaels or like a craft store associate. Yeah, just a fever dream movie. So Horrible Bosses. You have a funny story.
I have like my favorite story from working at the movie theater that's related to Horrible Bosses. So, to be like honest, I don't remember a whole lot about Horrible Bosses, the movie. But like,
I just remember Jennifer Aniston's a dentist and she just wants to have sex with Charlie Day the whole time.
oh yeah. And like, it's basically just that. It's like 3 people underneath 3 bad bosses and they like all have to kind of like work together basically. But so the funniest story that I have from working there is that I was working the box office and I think it was like a weekday morning and it was like matinee, and basically this guy comes up and he's wearing like a Crocodile Dundee hat and he asks for a ticket to see Cars 2, and he's by himself, and I was like, okay, sounds good. And so I like sell him a ticket, and this is when you printed tickets and like gave them to people, which not a lot of places totally do anymore. So I printed him his ticket, gave it to him. He went on his merry way. And then maybe like 25 minutes later, I just hear a knock on like the booth, like the door. And it's that guy. And like nobody does that. That doesn't like work at the movies. Like nobody's just like knocking on my box office to like talk to me. Cause like, why? Just come around the front. And he basically, I come out and I'm like, can I help you with something? And he was like, I wasn't trying to see Cars 2. I was trying to see Horrible Bosses. And I was like, oh. And he was like, you gave me the wrong ticket, and was like getting upset. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, sorry. I know you definitely said Cars 2, but like, I will exchange your ticket. Do you have your ticket? And I shit you not, he pulls it from out of his cheek as if it was chew, like tobacco chew, and tries to hand it to me. And it's like a wad at that point. And I just grab the trash can and I'm like, you can just throw it away. Like, I'm not touching that. So I go and print him a ticket for Horrible Bosses. Mind you, it's now like 30 minutes into the movie. So he's missed the first 30 minutes. And I'm like, just, okay, another day in paradise. Like, this is great. Why are there so many crazy people? Like, there really weren't that many crazy people. But anyway, basically what ends up happening is that he goes and sees Horrible Bosses 2, or not Horrible Bosses 2, the first Horrible Bosses, not Cars 2. And I guess while he's sitting in there, he ordered a bottle of Pinot Grigio, but then wouldn't order food. And like, I just remember I was in the box office and I could hear like one of the food servers like getting in trouble with the manager because she was like, you weren't supposed to like serve him a whole bottle of wine without ordering food. And like, now you're going to have to like interrupt his movie and tell him he needs to get food because he needs to sober up. And he was like, I'm concerned that he's drunk already. I was like, I'm concerned that he's drunk already. Like, he's insane. Mr. Crocodile Dundee. And like, basically they ended up telling him like, we will give you any food you want, but you have to order food for us to be able to serve you any more alcohol. And he ended up like coming out of his theater like slurring and like crazy angry and was like, I want my bottle of Pinot Grigio. And they were like, we're really sorry. Like, we can give you a burger. Like, we can give you a whole pizza. And he just was like so irate that he didn't even finish the movie. He was just yelling, and I had to call him a cab, and he fell asleep on the bench outside of the movie, waiting for his cab because he was publicly intoxicated. So yeah, that's that story. But it's funny because anytime now that we like are thinking about drinking Pinot Grigio, I just like think of that guy being like, I want my bottle. And like the way he called it like Pinot Grigio just like gags me every time. And like, It was funny because like for weeks after that, I just kept thinking of him as like a giant baby because all he was screaming was like, I want my bottle. I want my bottle. It's just like, I love that story.
Yeah, that's like an all-time movie theater story. Yeah, and even I don't think I was working that day.
You didn't work that day.
When you told me about it, it was just hilarious.
Such a fever dream.
There's some other movies here. So like I mentioned Captain America, the first Avenger, the first Chris Evans Captain America. Yeah, I kind of watched that without knowing anything about Captain America, and it was like, yeah, it was pretty good. But I never thought about, oh yeah, we need 4 more of these.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's another Justin Timberlake movie, Friends with Benefits.
He just was like having his moment.
He was trying to be a movie star. He also did In Time, which I think came out 2012. But yeah, Justin Timberlake and Mila Kunis, and
this was
like exactly what the title is, Friends with Benefits.
This was the summer where every movie maker was trying to use this trope of friends with benefits. And like I think the other movie that came out around that time,
No Strings Attached.
No Strings
Natalie
Attached.
Portman and Ashton Kutcher.
Yeah, like
there's another one with Anne Hathaway.
Yes.
Where it's like Love and Drugs or something, where they're like pharmacists doing it.
Yeah.
But there were like 3 separate movies where they're just like, we're friends who do it, but we're not in a relationship.
But then they accidentally fall in love type of thing. The only thing I remember about this movie, the Friends with Benefits movie, is that one of the quirks that Justin Timberlake's character had was that he's really bad at math. And it was like highly relatable. Like, I don't remember exactly what they're doing, but there's like one scene where like it's one of those jars where you have to like guess how many are in something. And he's like, I don't know, there's probably 10,000 in there. And she was like, do you really think there's 10,000 marbles in this one jar? And he's like, I don't know, 20,000? Like, he's like that bad at guesstimating, which I find really relatable. But literally, that's the only memory I have about the movie.
Yeah, apparently, yeah, Emma Stone has a very small part in that.
Andy
which
Samberg.
is funny. Yeah, Andy Samberg.
Woody Harrelson. Shaun White.
Yeah, it's directed by Will Gluck, who just did the Anyone But You movie with Sydney Sweeney.
Oh, yeah.
And Easy A. Yeah, it was one of those movies. It's like one of those things that they don't really do now, where it's just like
big star comedy, aside from Anyone But You.
Well, yeah, but even like, I mean, Justin Timberlake's way more famous than Glenn Powell comparatively. And like 2011, Mila Kunis was still kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta talk about Cowboys and Aliens for a second. It's not good. I haven't rewatched it since, but it's Daniel Craig and Harrison Ford as cowboys, and then all these aliens come, and that's the movie. And it was like
Paul Dano is in this.
It's like one of those movies. Yeah, it's directed by Jon Favreau. So this is like what he did this was right after Iron Man 2. But yeah, it was like, they don't really do this anymore, where it's just like ridiculous concept, funny title. Let's get 2 really good actors and let's try to sell this thing, even though it's probably going to be bad. Like, Hollywood doesn't do this anymore. So that's why I really want to watch this again, because it's like, you'll never get a movie like this where it's just so generic, so basic, but it has Harrison Ford and Daniel Craig at the height of him being Bond. And yeah, it's like relatively panned.
Yeah, the next one is The Help, which arguably is maybe the most critically acclaimed movie that we got the privilege of seeing while we were working there. I remember thoroughly enjoying it and being pretty like choked up at parts that were really, really good. It's a really long movie for what it is. And it's weird now because it's like on Hulu, and like streaming wasn't even a thing back then when this movie came out. Like, you literally, I remember driving in your car with you to go like return like discs from Netflix, like sending them back like at this time. And it's a little weird. And it's a little surreal to be like, oh, now you can watch this movie on Hulu.
Yeah, this was one of the last years before a lot of the streamers got pretty big relative. I mean, obviously the pandemic 8 years later after this really got the streaming industry up. But yeah, The Help, like I just remember, is it Emma Stone who eats the poop pie?
Yep.
Yeah, it was like during this time, it was like, 12 Years a Slave came out, I think, right after this. And it was just like, they made a lot of movies where it was like a conversation on the historical, like, Black experience with how, like, terrible all these white people treat them in different ways. And The Help was kind of like the family cookie cutter version of that, where it's like, yeah, these white people are racist, but the maids are funny and they're helping and they can give you a poop pie if you're really mean to them. Whereas like 12 Years a Slave is like, yeah, this was like really, really bad. And like,
Yeah.
it was just funny the different dynamics that Hollywood was playing at the time in that realm.
This was also, The Help is based off a book. And this was I feel like the kickstart of a lot of book to movie adaptations coming. Like this 2011 on was like book to movie adaptation, like free for all. And so even the like poster kind of looks like the book and like is colored very similarly. And like, yeah, we'll get to another book to movie adaptation. Well, actually three more book to movie adaptations on this list pretty shortly.
Just a few more we're going to run through. So 30 Minutes or Less is this comedy with...
It's not 30 minutes. It's 83 minutes.
Yeah, it's Jesse Eisenberg, and basically he's a pizza delivery guy, and the concept is if he doesn't deliver the pizza in 30 minutes or less, it's a free pizza, but the people he's delivering to, like, kidnap him. It's really bad, and, like, I don't remember anything about it, really. And then, so there's a few of these movies where, like, we didn't actually, like, sit down and watch the whole thing, but because we worked in the theater and we're constantly, like, going in and out of theaters, delivering food and whatnot, like, we saw bits and pieces of these. So, this Kevin James movie, Zookeeper, this was the one that I was waiting on you to get off, and I was like, I guess I'll watch Zookeeper for 20 minutes, and it's really, really bad. He just plays a bumble. It's like Paul Blart Mall Cop, only he's a zookeeper. That's literally the concept.
Then there's The Change Up, which is Jason Bateman and Ryan Reynolds, which this was just Ryan Reynolds' like heyday also. They basically switch bodies when it's like, Jason Bateman is like having babies and Ryan Reynolds is having a lot of sex, and then
it's just like
they basically just switch bodies. And I think at the end of it they realize like, oh, actually I want to go back to bye-bye. Like I don't remember a whole lot about it, but it's like pretty contrived as far as like a plot goes.
Very basic. And then Cars 2 we kind of talked about.
Yeah.
The Smurfs.
I remember serving food to a lot of like loud children in the Smurfs.
I just remember the hype of Katy Perry being Smurfette.
Yeah.
But then, the movie wasn't that good.
Yeah, I forgot that Katy Perry was... Yeah, that's nuts to me.
And then, Final Destination 5 was another one where I just briefly saw a little bit of it. I think I've seen most of, or the entirety of the first Final Destination, but not any of the other ones, so...
They give me anxiety.
Yeah, I just feel like it's pointless, anxiety inducing just to do it, and I don't find any like value in that personally, so like I don't really connect with those type of movies.
It's similar sort of to Saw, but Saw is like Final Destination with plot.
Yeah, Saw's actually trying to like it's like more of a like I'm trying to win this
mind game
to survive, or I'm just trying to survive this terrible situation, where it's like Final Destination's like, oh, I have a premonition that I'm gonna die, and it's like kind of you can't control it, you're just gonna die. So
it's like an OCD person's worst nightmare. So it's just like not the greatest, funnest time.
So the last three movies we're going to talk about real quick, these three, we actually went to different theaters to see them because they're basically date night. And, when you're working the movie theater,
You don't want to take a date to work.
it's one thing to be like, oh, we're off at 8 o'clock. Let's just stay here and watch a movie. But there were definitely days where we were like off work that we wanted to like go to different theaters to see. So the first one being Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 2.
And this was like, we talked about this probably in another episode, but this was the height of like midnight movie releases where you have to wait in line and, you can't reserve your seats. And like, it was kind of a nice like summation of, for me personally, it was like a nice summation of like the end of the entire Harry Potter saga. But then at the same time, you and I saw Deathly Hallows Part 1 with a big group of friends, and we saw Deathly Hallows Part 2 with the same big group of friends. But for the first one, for Part 1, we weren't dating. We were just like really, really, really good friends. Mm-hmm. And I think you liked me at that point. And like Part 2, you got to sit with me, and like
it's a big upgrade.
It was a big upgrade. It was cool because like some of the people that like we saw the Part 1 with, we like hadn't seen since Part 1, and so then we like all kind of were back for Part 2, and it's like, oh, y'all are dating now, and it was cool. Like we got so many pictures, and like, yeah, I it was nice. I don't really totally love Deathly Hallows Part 2, but I feel like it ended the franchise in a really good way.
I really like.
I don't think it's my favorite Harry Potter, is what I mean. Like,
oh yeah,
I prefer Deathly Hallows Part 1 to Deathly Hallows Part 2. But I like how it wrapped everything up.
Yeah.
There were some cringy parts, I will be honest, but we should go back and rewatch all of those soon just to...
Yeah, we'll have to do like a Harry Potter specific episode.
Yeah.
Then we saw the 2011 Winnie the Pooh. I couldn't tell you what specifically happens in this movie other than it's just Winnie the Pooh, and we liked it because it was like a newer version of what we saw or what everyone had seen before.
It's basically like redoing the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, which came out in the 70s. So it's familiar stories, and it's not like a brand new storyline, whereas like there had been a couple of, Winnie the Pooh movies that had come out, like the Tigger movie and the Heffalump movie that had like net new storylines. I sound like I know a lot about Winnie the Pooh. I really do. I like weirdly love Winnie the Pooh. I don't know why, but I just remember going to see this with you, and it was like a nice cozy time because I was like, I kind of know all these stories. Like, if I'm not mistaken, it's like the same one where like there was a couple of newer stories thrown in, but like if I remember correct, there was like the whole thing where he like eats too much honey and gets stuck in the little hole, and like they have to like come give him a light at night because he's like still stuck and his head sticking out of the hole and stuff, and like a lot of just like quintessential Winnie the Pooh. It kind of seemed like they were just trying to milk the Winnie the Pooh thing though, but I still loved it. It was short.
Yeah, it was very like classic kid friendly animated movie. And yeah, this last movie, One Day, starring Anne Hathaway and Jim Sturgis. This was another one based off a book.
Yeah, and I want to say they've redone this recently as a series. They recently redid it this year as a series. I don't know where it's streaming. I can't remember, but
Netflix.
Yeah, I've heard like relatively good things about it. The One Day movie is, I'll be honest, it's like quite depressing.
Yeah, I just remember it was a very downer of an ending.
It had a downer ending, but it's like basically it's like a love story set over like 20 years, I think. And it's just like two people continue to just keep like finding each other and like, trying to rekindle their relationship in different, parts of their life as they change and grow and become different people. And I remember like liking it decently at the time, but it's like you also just like hate the sadness of like how it makes you feel, because you're like, this just feels like a downer and sad. Like, y'all just need to kiss already. Like,
Yeah, it was like a sadder version of Before Sunrise.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
not as technically well made, obviously,
Yeah.
and worse dialogue, but conceptually a romantic day, and what do you do in the context of that day, but also how do you make it last longer than just a day was
Yeah.
kind of the basic. And then just the ending was, it gives a bad taste in your mouth because it's just like, well, that wasn't fun.
Yeah, yeah. You're like, that was great, but then this sucks. So, yeah, but that was most of the movies we saw summer of 2011. I have so many like just wild memories of like serving food and waiting for the pizza to come out of the oven and a fry falling off someone's plate. And I'm like, oh, I can't serve it to them because it fell on the tray. So I guess I'll eat it. And like, just the amount of weird adult things you learn, like
Yeah, it was
one of your first jobs and
Yeah.
you were there, like
yeah, like the situation of it would be like I would have my free soda in my cup I'd be in the kitchen and you're waiting for the orders to come in, but if you had the early shift or there were no orders, there wasn't much for you to do, and a lot of people would just order popcorn or chips, and so you're just like scooping the popcorn in a bucket and that's what you were doing. Or there were times where we would have to actually make the ranch.
I remember
That was a process that they taught us. But yeah, obviously, like when you can get 50% off food and free movies, it's a pretty good. I mean, we were getting minimum wage, so
Yeah.
which hasn't changed in 13 years, which is terrible.
which is weird.
But yeah, I would definitely work with you again in another movie theater. And I really enjoyed 13 years ago when we did that. And I think it's fun revisiting these movies, and having these memories with you is just a fun little thing to talk about. So I'm glad we got to do this episode.
Me too. And it's cool that we're still together after all these years.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Well,
But
thank you for listening.
thanks for listening.